answering subscribers' questions on 2 videos. First comment. And this was on one of our quad card videos, the ASUS Hyper M.2 by 16 card version 2 PCI Express 3 comparison tutorial install. And this comment from Mandonga. Amazing information. Maybe you could help me. I currently have an ASUS X570 Crosshair VIII with 1 TB M.2 NVMe PCI Express 4.0 installed on the motherboard itself. I'm looking to upgrade my storage, and I'd like to go with a 4 TB NVMe PCI Express 4.0 for now. But I would like to be able to get another one in the future. What would you recommend in order to make it work? This extra storage is not for the boot. I'll keep my current 1 TB Windows. The 4 TB is for work. Hope you can help me. Again, amazing video. Cheers. First response. Hi Mandonga. Welcome. Appreciate your comments. This one and the other one on a different video. Have read both of your comments. Working on video response for possible solutions, options, plural. Mandonga. Thanks a lot, Gil. Just found your channel a few days ago and I'm eating up all the content. You have no idea how helpful is this information. I can tell you are really passionate about the content. I will be waiting for the video if you end up doing it. If you need more info regarding my setup, I'm happy to provide it. Thanks a lot for these amazing videos. Cheers. Hi Mandonga. To reiterate, appreciate your comments. Fascinating, right? Working on video response for your options. Appreciate your patience. It's always fascinating to look at how we have a chipset by design, a motherboard implementation, and how that changes, because you change one thing, changes everything. And just as there are many chipsets as there are, there's even more motherboards, and no 2 motherboards are alike. So let's go take a look. Comment number 2. And this is on video. ASUS ROG Strix X299 eGaming 2 motherboard and ASUS Hyper M.2 by 16 quad card. And again from Mandonga. Hi there, Gil. I left a comment in an old video that I do not know if you'll be able to see. Maybe you can help me. I have an ASUS X570 Crosshair VIII Wi-Fi motherboard. Currently I'm using a 1 TB M.2 NVMe PCI Express 4 for Windows and my work, and I would like to increase the storage, only storage. I would like to play it safe, so I was thinking on getting for the moment a 4 TB M.2 NVMe PCI Express 4, maybe the Sabrent Rocket Plus or the FireCuda 530. If I'm not mistaken, my motherboard only allows PCI Express 4 on only the top M.2 slot. It has 2 M.2 NVMe slots. So if I'm not mistaken, I need a card extension that needs to go on at the second PCI Express slot by 8 slot, because I'm using the by 16 slot for my 3090 FE graphics card. I use it for work, so really important for me. My motherboards offer bifurcation, so I only need a PCI Express 4.0 expansion card. Here is my question. Is there any 2X PCI Express 4.0 expansion card by 8 slot 4x4? In the market, I've only seen the by 16 slot like the ASRock, ASUS Hyper Gigabyte, and some others. Are there any issues if I go with a by 16 extension and I'm only putting 2 4 TB M.2 NVMe PCI Express 4.0 drives? I'm really new to all this and I don't want to mess it up. Paraphrase. If you have a better idea in order to get internal M.2 NVMe storage, please let me know. I love your content. The information is priceless. Keep up the amazing work. Cheers. And our response. Hi Mandonga. To reiterate, appreciate your comments. Fascinating, right? Working on video response for your options. And that's where we are, and here's where we at. So what we need to do, look at the motherboard, we need to look at the chipset, look at the processor, see what we've got for PCI Express resource allocations. I'll go through the questions in order that they've been asked and see how we can address those best. But what I first want to do is take a look at that motherboard. The nice thing about this is an ASUS ROG Crosshair VIII Hero Wi-Fi. And keeping all that syntax in order will be essential if we were to look at the document that talks about bifurcation and how all this works out. I don't think we'll have to, but I mention it. So we need to go to support. I want to go to manual. Let's double check. There's only one manual. We'll download that. Now in the manual, there's 3 things we want to look at. 1, specifications. Number 2, motherboard layout. And number 3, which is kind of unique with the some of the nomenclature to ASUS, we could either look up the term Hyper or we can look up PCI Express by 16. I like the PCI Express by 16 because that's pretty universal. So those 3 things let's go check out. Specifications happen to be on page 9, so I will skip going to contents and go straight to page 9. We're going to work with this based on a Ryzen 5950 because it's just more cores, more threads, easier and simple to get you everything that we think you're going to need to do this with. Okay, this will support a 3rd generation Ryzen processor. Good to know. We have a chipset X570. You didn't ask about RAM. You've probably already got that set. Anybody else asking? I'm going to address this from the standpoint of a 5950, which is a third generation Ryzen processor. Even though it'll address 128 gigs, I would keep it at 64 gigs because you only want to use 2 DIMMs. Otherwise, you could have problems with slowing the system down performance-wise. It's the way the memory controller is set up. And as far as overclocking, this will go up to, 4600. I would probably look at DDR4 3200, but again, get whichever one is going to be the best bang for the buck for you. You'll just have to research that. Always test and verify. The part we want to focus on is the expansion slots, and we have 2 PCI Express 4.0 by 16 slots mechanically. Electrically, the first slot is by 16, but when both slots are used, the first 2 slots are used simultaneously because they are, again, to reiterate, to the CPU, they each are by 8. So just an FYI, in case you didn't realize it, your GPU is in an 8-lane slot when you start using that second 8-lane slot. When they're used simultaneously together, you've only got so many resources. You've got about, to the best of my recollection, will confirm 20 PCI Express lanes to the CPU. So if you've got 16 lanes to one slot, that gives you 4 lanes to an M.2. That's 20 lanes. Okay, if you've got 16 lanes to one slot, then you have 2 slots. You've got 8 lanes and 8 lanes. There's only so much you can do. We'll go through all that, but that's one thing we need to point out. Next thing we need to look at, let's see what we've got for M.2 drives. And we'll verify all this when we look at the motherboard layout. You have one M.2 to the CPU and one M.2 through the chipset. They are both, because that's X570 PCI Express 4.0, but we'll verify that. And you've got 8 SATA ports. It'd be nice, on a side note, if we could reallocate resources for at least 4 of those SATA ports. You have to think of it this way. Each SATA port is a PCI Express lane. So if you got 8 SATA ports, there's 4 lanes and 4 lanes. If we could take 4 lanes and reallocate that to an M.2 drive. Now, 10 years ago, that was a big deal, but that was 10 years ago. Now we want fast storage, and it's an M.2 NVMe PCI Express drive. It's a difference in about 600 megabytes per second for SATA versus, on PCI Express 3, you're looking at 3,500 megabytes per second. On PCI Express 4, which has been a first, second, and third generation, it'll be up to around 7,000 megabytes per second on PCI Express 4. So, yeah, from that to that, big deal. So the option number 3, we'll go do a search for PCI Express by 16, and that will take us to page 82. On page 82, which is onboard device configuration, this says PCI Express by 16_2. There is no PCI Express by 16_1. Some motherboards have it, I pointed out. And of course, there is no PCI Express by 16_3 because it's only a 4-lane slot. So the only slot we can bifurcate is slot number 2. And it talks here about by 8 mode or PCI RAID mode. I really wish they would keep that simple because RAID mode is the second step. The first step is bifurcation. Bifurcation would be 4x4. So you'll see 3 different terminologies that ASUS will use. PCI RAID mode, 4x4, or number 3, Hyper. Hyper, of course, referring to the quad card. And I have to mention this right now about the quad card because as one of your options, first of all, you have an ASUS motherboard. So if you're going to do an add-in card, one of the cards I'm going to recommend, which might be the best deal, depending on how comfortable you are dealing with tech support. In other words, if you go ask ASUS a question, it is what it is, and you say you got an ASUS motherboard, this motherboard, and then you say you put in an adapter. Next question is going to be, is that an ASUS adapter? Well, ASUS only makes a quad adapter, the Hyper adapter. If that's the adapter you've put in, then they'll do their best to answer your question. But if they find something like Supermicro or Gigabyte or ASRock or anybody else, they'll stop right there and say we don't support that equipment. So I just want to interject that. But it's important to know this. I expect those drives on an 8-lane slot to be sequential, and that's important. And also because this refers to the Hyper card, I don't want to say assume, but it should be safe to say that by referring to a Hyper card, and there's nothing to give me indication otherwise about it not being sequential, usually your I/O on a motherboard, and I'll show here on this particular system, is usually from the back forward. In other words, 4 lanes accounted for from the I/O panel and then the next 4 lanes. So that's what we mean by, so when we're talking about sequential, we're talking about 4 lanes and 4 lanes in order, 1, 2, 3, 4. If it were different than sequential, and we've seen this on some boards where a slot will be bifurcated 2x8 and then 4x4, that implies you can put 3 drives on, which would be in position 1 and position 3 and 4 because of the sequential nature of it from the back to the front. So to reiterate, because this is 4x4 and it talks about a hyperquad, the expectation, not the assumption, is going to be one M.2 drive sequential with the next M.2 drive. Now, that's significant because my first inclination would be to put in a dual adapter. Let's go verify resources and just double check about the chipset and about the processor. We'll go to AMD about the X570. Let's take a look at the specifications. And right there, this says 36 usable PCI Express 4.0 lanes. So if there's any doubt or any question, your chipset is PCI Express 4.0. The difference you're going to get in speed from CPU lanes versus chipset lanes, you're going to have to measure it, test it, and verify because there is a difference, and I wouldn't raid the two together, but unless you test it, you're not going to know the difference. So they're still going to both be fast. It's just whatever goes to the CPU and through CPU lanes like through the PCI Express bus, that's going to be the faster. Anything through the chipset will be a little bit slower. So PCI Express 4.0. Let's check the processor. And to reiterate, we're going to base this on the AMD Ryzen 9 5950. 16 cores, 32 threads. We'll check the specs, preferably the full specs. Ryzen 9, 16 cores, 32 threads, up to 4.9 gigahertz. Nice cache. And here we have, and I wish they gave the full detail on this, but at least we have PCI Express 4. What we don't have are how many lanes. But what we do know, and what matters, is, for example, on the chipset, it says you've got 36 lanes. Okay, the total lane count is important, and it gets more important as we go higher up the food chain from a high-end desktop to a workstation. However, what matters most is the allocation of resources that we can do something with, specifically to the CPU. To reiterate, we have 20 PCI Express lanes, so we need to know how those are allocated. And that's what we're looking at in the motherboard on the BIOS when we look at either that by 16_2 slot or the Hyper, either one of those terminologies. That's about what's going to the CPU, which is probably easier to look at the motherboard layout, which is on page 18. So right there is PCI Express with 16_1 and M.2_1. And those two items right there is 20 lanes. Now, if we take those 20 lanes to reiterate and divvy them up, then we've got to split them between two 16-lane slots mechanically, which are about 8 slots electrically when used simultaneously, and one M.2. But that all that is to the CPU. And PCI Express with 16_3, and also the PCI Express by 1 slot, all that is through the chipset. So you could you can populate both of those slots. The ones that are PCI Express with 16_2 to the CPU, you can populate with M.2 drives. And I'll go through the list on how many. And also you can take advantage of that PCI Express with 16_3 slot. You can populate that with the drive. But because now that we've confirmed you have PCI Express 4 on the CPU and PCI Express 4 on the chipset, if you want to keep it simple just to make this work, you can put that second drive, the work drive, the 4 terabyte, and if you're using like the Seagate FireCuda 530, which is 3rd generation, you'll get about 7,000 megabytes per second on that drive. You can put it on that second slot, you'll be in business. That's the simplest solution. And if you want to add more storage, then you can either add a storage drive to the 3rd slot, because it can either take a single drive or 2 drives. With a single drive, good to go as is. If you put 2 drives on there, you've got to have a card that's self-bifurcated. Amfeltec makes a card for that. Amfeltec also makes a card that'll work, what they call the Squid, on a 16-lane slot, which you don't have, or an 8-lane slot, which you do, but you got to have the edge connector to convert it. It's an additional part, but that'll let you put in 6 drives on an 8-lane slot, which is pretty wicked. Your other option are the cards like you mentioned, and you could use one of those, 2 drives. My personal favorite for the dual adapter is the Supermicro card. All these I'll have listed and itemized, so in case you want to consider all your options. So I think you're going to be in a good spot to do what you want to do. But my suggestion in the future, you might want to think about a higher end chipset. Now I didn't mention high point, because the high point cards all require a 16-lane slot, which you don't have. If you want to get, say, 2 drives on a card, we have a solution. If you want to put 4 drives on the card, you can't use a standard quad card because those require motherboard bifurcation, and that bifurcation is only going to give you 2 drives. However, Glotrends makes a card that will work in an 8-lane slot. It's this Glotrends Sky, and that, because it's self-bifurcating, gives you 4 drives. Now, it's PCI Express 3. You got PCI Express 4, so you want to keep the speed. So those are pretty much the options. I'll have all that stuff in the description. I hope this helps. I want to thank you for watching. I think we've got something coming up about Thunderbolt coming up in the next video. This is BuildOrBuy. My name is Gil Boyd. Welcome. We're looking forward to seeing you in the next one. We're out.